Welcome in, everybody. Another edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. We are back, okay? So if you are watching or listening on YouTube, we did the full hour Aaron Torres pod on Sunday morning, reacting to Alabama beating Tennessee, hot seats at LSU and Auburn, you know, what's going on with Texas and Arch Manning. But we referenced throughout the show that we would be on Billy Napier watch. The expectation was that he would be fired here on Sunday. I wouldn't call it a report, but I put out a tweet earlier this week. I heard from multiple people, including one person at practice last week. It was weird all week. It was inevitable. It was going to happen. And so right now we will do a reaction. If you're listening on podcast after the fact, we're just going to go ahead and put this on the feed with the rest of the podcast. It's going to be like a 2-hour podcast. I apologize, but there's nothing we can do. Billy Napier officially fired. We're going to go ahead and get into all of this in a minute, what it means, why now, decisions before, and by the way, who's going to be next? Because I think they actually will get a legitimate candidate here upcoming. Before we do, though, I got to go ahead and mention it. I got to go ahead and thank our friends. I got to thank our ticketing partners of the Aaron Torres pod, SeatGeek and the SeatGeek app. SeatGeek is America's #1 ticketing app. 28 million downloads on the SeatGeek app. Best part is about SeatGeek, they take care of all the customers, right? So every ticket on the app is rated 1 through 10. Green dot means go ahead and purchase. Red dot means maybe stay away. But you know what really the best part is about SeatGeek? SeatGeek takes care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. I mentioned it earlier, but how about this? Listeners of the Aaron Torres pod, SeatGeek.com. All you got to do is go to SeatGeek.com or the SeatGeek app, okay? Use promo code Torres on SeatGeek. It gets you $20 off your first purchase. $20 off your first purchase with promo code Torres at SeatGeek. I mentioned it earlier today that we have people using this app every single day. We had an Indiana fan tell me he's already bought tickets to the Big Ten championship game. A UConn fan with hockey tickets. Paul, who listens regularly to the show, went to the A&M Florida game, all thanks to SeatGeek. So SeatGeek.com, use promo code Torres. It will get you $20 off your first purchase. You need to go to all sorts of big games. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. With that said, listen, let's not beat around the bush. No more time to waste. Let's get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day, again, if you're just joining us, Billy Napier, Sunday afternoon, was officially fired as the Florida Gators football coach. As I said, this was expected. As I said, I tweeted about it. Josh Pate was talking about it on his show. Matt Hayes was referencing it in an article about boosters. And transparently, it was just time. And I'll say this, Billy Napier, so I have no sort of personal relationship with Billy Napier on any level. Seems like a good guy, right? I even listened to his press conference after the game against Mississippi State on Saturday just to kind of see, would he say anything? What would his vibe be? What would the tone be? And I do think he was kind of at peace with the decision. He said, listen, we never, take for granted winning SEC games at home, on the road, whatever. I'm going to go home, eat a good meal and whatever. But I think he knew, and as I've said a few times now, I know people in the building, and last week they were, after the A&M game, I think they were kind of preparing. This is going to happen. We actually mentioned it on the Sunday morning show, but, I think the USF loss, that was when I think everybody kind of knew it was over. You go back, you can see on the sidelines just how deflated everybody was, how everybody kind of knew that things were not getting solved, things were not getting fixed. And I look back at it, Florida's 3-4 right now. If they beat South Florida, they're 4-3. Florida State apparently stinks. Kentucky stinks. Tennessee is a team you have had success against in the swamp. You can justify bringing him back at 4-3 to at least finish the season. Can you get back to 8-9 wins? But when you lose that game to USF at home, it's over. And like I said, I go back to what I said a few minutes ago of, like, I feel bad, but also it is time. I mean, the stats on this guy are jarring, and I actually thought the Mississippi State game on Saturday was kind of the perfect microcosm for the Billy Napier era. a game where you have it won, then it's not won. You're basically in control, and then every time something good happens, you're committing a penalty. There's a holding downfield, there's a false start, there's a whatever, and it's like, you're Florida. This is year 4, Mississippi State at home. I know they're greatly improved under Jeff Lebby, but the counter to that is you should not be losing at home to Jeff Lebby and Mississippi State, and it shouldn't even be frankly close. And so that was the metaphor for the season. That was the metaphor for what Florida has been under Billy Napier. And you just sit there and you say, there's just no excuses at this point, and the stats back it up. I saw we referenced this throughout a few weeks ago, but the Brett McMurphy report that basically said he's good in the building, Sunday through Friday, but it doesn't translate till Monday, or it doesn't translate on Saturdays. That was the Billy Napier era, right? You go back and you watch his teams, and it did not translate. First of all, in his time at Florida, 4 years, 22 and 23 overall. Okay. Last year was by far his best year, 8-5. Frankly, was kind of lucky to get last year, because remember, they started 4-5 overall. They got destroyed by Miami at home. They lose to Georgia, and then going into that Texas game, Scott Strickland says, no, this is my coach. We're not letting him go, whatever. And so I just bring it up because he was kind of lucky to get this year. But like I said, once the South Florida game happens, I just did not see it. And the record backs it up. I mean, couple things here: 22 and 23 overall in year 4, 12 and 16 in the SEC. Some of the other stats that are worth noting: 0 and 14 away from the swamp against ranked teams. That ain't going to get the job done. And then, almost comically bad against rivals. And again, I'm not trying to bury the guy on a day he gets fired. By the way, he's getting $20 million, so nobody's feeling too bad for him. But on a day where he gets fired, the win-loss record against the rivals was just really what did him in. 0-3 against Georgia, which is obviously the next team on the schedule after the bye. 1-3 against LSU, including a loss to this year's LSU team, which isn't very good. 1-2 against Tennessee. They obviously have not played them this year. 0-2 against Miami. I think the Miami thing to me feels significant. Remember, Mario Cristobal hired the same offseason as Billy Napier, and he beat his brains in back-to-back years. 1-2 against Florida State. The Florida State win was whatever. And then here's a couple other interesting notes for you. Kentucky is currently on a 2+ year losing streak against power conference teams at home. This win against a power conference team, including the SEC, at home, Kroger Field, came back in September of 2023. You guessed it. It was to Billy Napier's Florida Gators. And oh, by the way, remember that year they missed a bowl game. They lost 5 straight games to end the regular season. Well, guess what happened that year as well? Arkansas goes 1-7 in the SEC. Their only win of the season was against Florida at the Swamp. First time Arkansas had ever won at the Swamp. I mean, every single week it was a new low. Losing to USF at home this year, never acceptable. And it just felt like it was time. And again, by the way, I got a little bit of this pushback over the course of the week. Torres, if you and everyone in the media knows it's happening on Sunday, why are you allowing him to coach on Saturday? Listen, it's the game before a bye. You're not going to fire him in the middle of the week. And now that we're through 4 games, the team's going to finish out the season, right? Those guys, there's no incentive for them to not finish out the season. There's, all sorts of arguments about NIL this and NIL that. You got to, 1, you might have to play just because of NIL, but 2, now there's no 4-game redshirt rule. There was going into the first bye. Frankly, I think if they had played a 5th game, he might have been fired going into the first bye, but instead he survives. They beat Texas, and then from there go 1-1. Obviously, the loss last week to A&M, the win this week against Mississippi State, and he's out. So it's completely over. And I think from my perspective, it's time for us to look ahead. Because to me, we knew this was coming. Listen, Billy Napier is going to get $20 million. We always feel bad. I get it. If you want to feel bad for the guys and girls behind the scenes that are making $25K a year, $30K a year, $50K a year, that now we're going to have to move, other families that are going to have to uproot their children. I get it. It's okay to feel bad for everybody else. You shouldn't feel bad for Billy Napier, though. He had opportunities. He's going to get $20 million. I think the last Billy Napier thought, because I wanted to get to candidates, is that I think when I look at Billy Napier, what stands out to me is that this was all avoidable. If he had just hired an offensive coordinator last offseason, my hunch is he probably still has the Florida coaching job. And so the fact that he refused to hire the OC when the offense sputtered, he had nobody to blame but himself. So he's out. And with that said, I do think it is time to start to look ahead. Again, we can go ahead and pour flowers on Billy Napier's grave, but he's going to make $20 million. I actually think I think if I was a group of 5 school, I might hire him going forward. I sit there and say, like, I would make sure he's bringing an OC, but like if Tulane loses John Summerall, if USF, maybe not USF, maybe that's not the right one, but if Tulane loses John Summerall, like there are spots where I think he could be good. He was not built for the SEC. With that said, like, let's start to look ahead because we knew this was coming. And I'll say this, I think Florida's going to get some pretty good candidates, okay? So let's go ahead and dive into the potential candidates for Florida because I do think they are going to get the big names that you would want if you're a Florida fan. And I know every coaching carousel, we always throw out the biggest names possible, and a lot of times it doesn't end up happening. Well, I think Florida is the exception. Listen, 2 coaches in the last 30 years have won a national championship there. I think the stat that blew me away, all these coaches since Urban Meyer that we've deemed to be a disaster outside of Billy Napier, Dan Mullen, multiple 10-win seasons. Jim McElwain, multiple SEC championship games. Oh, by the way, on top of that, let's also not forget that Will Muschamp had a 10-win season. So all these coaches that we think are just a train wreck, let's never forget, they all won 10+. So if the bad coaches can win 10+ games at Florida, I know it's a tougher job, 9-game SEC. The bottom of the SEC is better. The SEC East no longer exists. So, Vanderbilt's not on the schedule, even though they're good. I get it. I think they are going to get good candidates. Should mention, by the way, before we get to candidates, I do want to thank our friends and our hotel partners, Circa Sportsbook, Circa Casino. Listen, if you're in Vegas, best place to watch games. Florida Gators fans, you're going to be out in Vegas for that season opening game against Arizona. You can get your tickets, SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. By the way, I saw the Florida basketball game against UConn, under $100 on SeatGeek. You're going to want to use SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. But also, when you're in Vegas, you're going to need a place to watch that game, or you're going to need a place to hang out in the lead up to that game. You're going to want to go to Circa Sportsbook, biggest sportsbook in the world, best place. It's where we use all of our lines, all of our point spreads. And the best part about Circa is that in addition to the fact that they have the world's biggest sportsbook in Vegas, Gators fans, I better see you there. We'll be doing a live stream, by the way, that Monday morning of Florida, Arizona in Vegas, 2 Mondays from tomorrow when the Gators open up their back-to-back title defense. But I bring it up because Circa is the best place to watch games in Vegas, but they have opened up a brand new facility in Kentucky as well. Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky, replica sportsbook of the spot in Vegas. It's just the best place to watch games. Circa Sportsbook, Circa Casino, Mint Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky. We appreciate their support. And as we get set for Georgia, Florida in 2 weeks, as well as Florida, Arizona, guess what? We're going to be using all of Circa's lines. We appreciate their support. All right. Let's go ahead and keep the Billy Napier conversation going, and let's go ahead and start talking about what is next. Because to me, like I said a minute ago, I think a couple years ago, you went ahead and got cute. A couple years ago, you went ahead and said, we're going to go with the hot group of 5 candidate. I think right now, whoever's making the hire at Florida, and I'm not totally positive it is going to be Scott Strickland, the AD, I think we're going big game hunting, baby. And when I say we, I'm not a Gators fan. I don't care who Florida hires, but I think Florida, the boosters understand how good the job is. They understand we have to stop getting cute with these coaching searches. Jim McElwain, group of 5 guy, Billy Napier, Sunbelt Billy, Dan Mullen, whatever. We're going after the big fish. And I'll say this, the biggest fish out there, it is Lane Kiffin. And I think Lane Kiffin, this is a job that he will listen to. First of all, with Lane Kiffin, we have to remember, this was a guy that a few years ago, remember, almost took the Auburn job, had to be talked out of the Auburn job by his daughter, who had just moved to Oxford and did not want to leave. Well, guess what? She's in college now as we've talked about, listen, I don't get into the love lives of a, college, relationship, but she's dating. Her boyfriend plays on the LSU football team. She's busy. She's not like, it's not like she's hanging out at dad's house like she's 16, 17 years old, still in high school. And so to me, now that she has kind of evolved in her life, now a student at Ole Miss, I think it's time for Lane Kiffin to move on. I think it's time for Lane Kiffin to start thinking about other jobs. And like I said, if he was this close to Auburn, I have no doubt that Florida intrigues him. And I think this is the job that he ultimately takes if and when he's offered. Now, what's interesting, I think there's two interesting things. Well, really three interesting things now that I'm thinking about it. One, did you see the report on Friday? Okay. So remember, this was a day after Curt Cignetti signed the big extension at Indiana. Well, if you remember, a day after, there was kind of a report that fell under the radar, but Ole Miss AD Keith Carter actually put out a statement where he said, we are actively trying to keep Coach Kiffin and give him a long-term extension, okay? Now, some of you perceive that as, Lane Kiffin is staying at Ole Miss. That is not how I perceived it at all, okay? How I actually perceived it was the AD putting it out there like, hey, if this guy leaves, I want it out here weeks in advance that I did everything I could to keep him. And so I think when you look at Florida, listen, you can just win at a higher level at Florida. What Lane Kiffin is doing is unbelievable at Ole Miss. Like, it's worth noting. I think you can argue Lane Kiffin right now in college football, top 2, top 3 coach in America. Okay. I know what people are saying. He doesn't have the 2 natties like Kirby. He doesn't have the natty like Ryan Day. Listen, Lane Kiffin also doesn't have the resources that those teams have and the ability to recruit at the level that those schools have. Give him Georgia's personnel. Let him pick the quarterback. Let him pick the receivers. It's game over. Ohio State, it's the same. And that's not a knock on Ryan Day. That's not a knock on Kirby Smart. It's just the reality. And so to me, the notion that Lane Kiffin, it's not an upgrade, it is. I know we have this notion of like in the NIL portal world, like you can build a champion anywhere, and you can. But we also can't deny it's easier in certain places than others. Yes, you can build a championship caliber team at Indiana, but Curt Cignetti is sort of an outlier, and it's a lot easier to do it at Ohio State. Yes, you can build a national championship contender at Ole Miss, but it's a lot easier to do it at LSU, at Georgia, at Florida, at Alabama. And I do think Lane Kiffin's kind of hitting a ceiling here, right? I mean, think about what Lane Kiffin is doing right now. 6-1, only loss at Georgia. He's doing it with a quarterback that was at the D2 level last year, okay? And I know that's kind of an outlier, and that wasn't who he was expecting to be his quarterback. It doesn't change the fact that, like, it's just easier at Florida. So many players in that state, so many high school players, so many bounce-back guys, by the way. You know, guys that go to an Ohio State, a Texas, a USC, or wherever, doesn't work out, come back to Florida. And yes, there's more competition with Miami and Florida State and everybody that recruits the SEC in Florida. But the counter to that is there's just so many more players. And I really thought last year was kind of the ceiling for Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. You had a first-round pick in Jackson Dart. You had Walter Nolan on the defensive line. I don't know that you're going to be able to build a better roster than that, and it didn't work. I'll say this. If you're a Florida Gators fan, you know what was the best thing that actually happened to you this weekend besides Billy Napier getting fired? It was Ole Miss losing to Georgia, because this was probably my biggest concern. This was probably my biggest concern for the Florida Gators, is the fact that if Lane Kiffin keeps winning, he is going to go to the college football playoff, and the deeper he goes in the playoff, the less likely you are to have him. Now, the good news is, with the portal not opening until January 1st, there's more leeway. You know, it used to be even the last year or two, you basically had to have the coach in place December 1, the day after the season ended in December, because if not, then guess what? You were going to miss the whole portal cycle. You weren't going to be able to refill your roster. Now it's different. Now you don't have to. And if you're Florida, let's say Ole Miss does get the 11 seed in the college football playoff. Let's say they have to go to Oregon in round 1 or whatever. You can wait until after that game. You could even wait until after a potential quarterfinal on January 1st if Lane Kiffin advances and Ole Miss advances in the first round. But by losing to Georgia over the weekend, 1, they took their first loss. 2, it certainly doesn't eliminate them from the SEC championship race, but obviously Georgia would have a tiebreak over them and whatever. And so it does help you in some way if you're Florida. So I think Lane Kiffin is the favorite. I think he will take the job when and if he's offered. Couple more things. We saw the report from Ryan McGee, ESPN, a few weeks ago that Florida boosters felt like they had Lane Kiffin wrapped up, and Scott Strickland basically undercut them last year during, late November, early December, when Scott Strickland announced that basically he was bringing back Billy Napier. So Florida feels like they had Billy Napier last year. This one just makes too much sense. And I'll just be real. I actually do think it's going to happen, assuming, of course, that Ole Miss doesn't make some magical run to the national championship, semifinals, whatever. In terms of other names, I think Florida's big game hunting. I really do. There's this perception, fair or not, that Marcus Freeman is available. I don't know if he is. What I do know is this, is that I do know that Florida is a better job than Notre Dame in this era, in this world. There is a reason 20 years ago, Urban Meyer took the Florida job instead of the Notre Dame job. It was because it's easier to win at Florida than it is at Notre Dame. And so with Marcus Freeman, I'll be curious. Do I think he's available today? I don't. Do I think he's focused on his team right now? I do. But if they lose a third game, they're going to be out of the college football playoff race. And if he starts to think that he's hit his head against the ceiling and that, the ceiling at Notre Dame isn't what the ceiling is at Florida, does he consider? I don't know. But I think it's worth a phone call, right? And again, for people who are going to say no one ever leaves Notre Dame. First of all, Brian Kelly just left Notre Dame 4 or 5 years ago. And part of the reason that Brian Kelly left Notre Dame is the same reason that Marcus Freeman, in theory, could leave Notre Dame as well. Small school, Catholic school, not a great recruiting base. Listen, that campus, that university just isn't for everybody, right? Listen, I don't know how to put it delicately. Some guys, let me put it this way. I think the story that I've heard, I'd have to confirm this. I don't even think Notre Dame has co-ed dorms right now. Like, I still think in 2025, whatever it is, they don't have co-ed dorms. I don't think, let me put it this way. I think if you live in student dorms, I don't think the opposite sex is allowed to stay over. I could be wrong on that. So, that's a little bit different than some other places. And, that's what you're recruiting to if you're Marcus Freeman. And so, listen, are there ways around it? Move off campus, whatever. The point I'm trying to make, Notre Dame is still, even in this era, not an easy place to recruit. And I think the other thing I keep going back to with Notre Dame, I think it is increasingly getting hard for Notre Dame to schedule as well. Listen, this year, their whole season came down to week 1, week 2. Well, they lost week 1 to Miami. They lost week 2 to Texas A&M. And ever since then, it has been this uphill battle to put together a resume, in part because it's hard for them to get games. Big Ten plays a 9-game league schedule. SEC going to a 9-game league schedule. Now, it's worth noting the Big Ten, the SEC, they require the 10th game against a power conference team, but there's only so many of those to go around, right? And so it's getting harder. We heard last night, this might be the last USC Notre Dame game for a while, at least until Lincoln Riley leaves. And so it's just, to me, one of those situations where, I think it's going to get tougher at Notre Dame until they join a conference, if they ever join a conference. And if they don't, by the way, the ACC is going to a 9th league game. So all of a sudden, some of those games that you get against some of their better teams are no longer going to be on the schedule. So these are things that you have to think about if you're Marcus Freeman, and you're never going to be hotter than you are now, coming off a college football playoff appearance a year ago. And yeah, we'll see what happens. I think another name, I don't know if Florida fans are super behind this one, but Eli Drinkwitz, listen, I think Eli Drinkwitz, he's another one, a little bit like Lane Kiffin. I think he's hit a little bit of a ceiling at Missouri. We saw it on Saturday night. Listen, another good team for Missouri that starts 5-0. You lose to Alabama. You go on the road to Auburn. Auburn was probably the better team at every single position on the field except one, and that's quarterback. And so if Auburn is 0-4 right now and you barely beat them, it's not going to get any easier at Missouri. And so if you're Eli Drinkwitz, it's been well reported that he's looking at other jobs, fair or not. And again, I don't think it's going to get easier for them. Their next 3 are at Vandy, Texas A&M, and I guess Oklahoma would be their 4th game. They do have Mississippi State in between. But they have been one that has really been able to take advantage of the schedule. Last year, they go 9-3 overall, 10-3 with a bowl win. The year before, they go 11-2. But can they keep doing that as the schedule gets tougher? And so to me, I absolutely think Eli Drinkwitz is a candidate. If Lane Kiffin doesn't get the job, I think that is the name that will be most likely to be the next coach at Florida. And I do think, in my opinion, that leads perfectly to this segue. I think Florida, as I said before, is big game hunting. The one thing I've consistently been told is a couple things. One, no G5 guys. So if you're a Kentucky fan that's hoping to get John Summerall after the season, if you're an Auburn fan that's hoping to get John Summerall after the season, if you're an Arkansas fan, hey, Alex Golish's wife is from the state of Arkansas. I don't think those guys are candidates at Florida. I don't think you can go the group of 5 route again if you're the Florida Gators. Conversely, I'd be curious, is John Gruden, is he too much of a wild card? Listen, John Gruden wants to coach, man. Like, I don't know if you saw, he was on Part of My Take on Friday, and he said, I'm still preparing as if I will be a head coach next year. That means he's trying to put together a staff. That means he's trying to figure out recruiting. Now, I don't think he's a candidate at Florida, but could he be somewhere? Absolutely. But I don't know that he's a candidate at Florida. So I guess what I'm trying to say, Lane Kiffin is the first call, second call, third call, fourth call, fifth call, sixth call, seventh call, eighth call, ninth call. If you don't get him, you're obviously going to go after Marcus Freeman. Eli Drinkwitz is another one. You know, I think the other name that feels pseudo-obvious, not the sexiest name that I don't think would move the needle at this point, Jedd Fisch at Washington is a Florida alum. Listen, I've been critical of Jedd Fisch, but he did build a monster at Arizona. I actually think the biggest mistake Jedd Fisch made was going to Washington when he did. Arizona would have been the best team in the Big 12 last year and would have competed for a college football playoff with Tetero McMillan and the roster that they put together. He ends up leaving, going to Washington. And now I think I don't want to say he's stuck there, but they're 5-2. They're really good. For people who do not know, Jedd Fisch is a Florida alum. For a long time, it was believed the only job he would leave Arizona for would be the Florida Gators. He chooses to go to Washington, but has he kind of coached himself out of the Florida job? One, with kind of a pretty big contract as far as a buyout is concerned, but then two, he's sitting right now at 5-2. They have Illinois and they still have Oregon on the schedule. I guess 8-4, you'd have to consider him, but he is certainly probably another big name that you would think, but I think they are going power conference head coach. Lane Kiffin's call 1 through 10, then 11 through whatever is Marcus Freeman. And if all them say no, Eli Drinkwitz, and I would probably add Jedd Fisch to the mix as well. Don't think John Summerall's a candidate. Don't think Alex Golish is a candidate. All right, the chat is humming. I see Florida is a basketball school now, so I guess that means that we will see you in Vegas, baby. I'll see you in Vegas for the opener against Arizona. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres, by the way, will get you $20 off your ticket if you are going, Florida fans. All right, I want to come back, get to some of your questions, but before we do that, we got to go ahead, take a quick break, come back. By the way, on the podcast, I think we'll wrap it right here. We'll get to the rest of the show, but for the YouTube audience, we'll take a quick break, answer some of your questions. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, you know what we got to do. We got to thank our friends. We got to thank our partners. We got to go ahead and thank Cauley Puffs and CauleyPuffs.com. Yeah, you see the logo on the back of the screen right here. Okay, so I've told you all about Cauley Puffs, but family-owned company, not far from where I live. Joey, a huge sports fan. And one day he was sitting on the couch and he said, you know what? I need a snack that is both healthy but delicious, something my kids are going to love, something my family's going to love, something I'm going to love. And so he came up with Cauley Puffs. This is the new age health food snack. You don't need to go to the grocery aisle and buy all that crap, the Doritos, the Fritos. No, my friends, you need Cauley Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But here's the best part. They taste freaking delicious. Actually, there's another best part. In addition to tasting delicious, in addition to being healthy, they are also taking care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. Okay, so check this out. All you got to do is go to CauleyPuffs.com. That's CauleyPuffs.com, CauleyPuffs.com, and you can get 15% off any purchase with the promo code Torres. That's Torres, Torres. It's that simple. 15% off any purchase. 1 bag to try them out, 100 bags to cater a party. Doesn't really matter. Promo code Torres. CauliPuffs.com gets you 15% off. Cauli Puffs also available on Amazon. You obviously can't get the promo code there, but CauliPuffs.com, CauliPuffs.com, promo code Torres gets you 15% off any purchase. Thank you to our friends at Cauli Puffs. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Only got a few more minutes. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. By the way, see that On3 is already done with their live stream. It's amazing. All these other companies, they need 20 people to try to take down Torres. Torres going live after going live all morning after doing radio last night. That's why you got to subscribe to the channel. We're closing on 63,000 subscribers. Let's get to us. A lot of when is Mark Stoops coming? Let's get to some of those. Let's see here. Darren says, please tell us that Mark Stoops is on the short list to replace Billy Napier. I don't know how long the list would have to get for Mark Stoops to be a replacement hypothetical for Billy Napier. I'll add this, though. Mark Stoops is working the phones, try to convince somebody to hire him. There's no market for Mark Stoops. Don't let him fool you. By the way, it was funny. My buddy Dalton Hughes, who used to work for Texags, tweeted out last night after the goal line snafu. This is why Mark Stoops is no longer the A&M coach. It was funny. Had to be there. Little Chi says Lane Kiffin is already packing his bags. I think that's probably the case. My boy Carter the Power says Torres with the sources. Listen, I hate to brag. I did say on social media, I said he's gone after the game. I saw this one. I thought this was interesting. Let me see here. Where was it? Let me see how. I saw a funny one. Where was it? Give me 1 second. 1 second. Oh, man. Well, whatever. The insinuation was somebody said something to the effect of, can't believe he got fired after a loss. You know, I'll say this. There's a historical precedent for this, right? If you remember 2 years ago, and somebody I think is referencing this in the chat, in the 2023 season, here it is. Jordan says they fired him after a win. Hilarious. There's a historical precedent for this. Remember, November of 2023, Jimbo Fisher beats Mississippi State, gets fired a day later. So I guess the theme here is don't beat Mississippi State, you might get fired. If you lose to them, you know, who knows? But if you win, you might get fired. So unbelievable. Let's get to some thoughts, some comments. Chat is just comical today. Okay. By the way, somebody says the real question for the Torres on UK account is Jalen Lowe going to be okay? Jalen Lowe, the Kentucky point guard. We all know that Florida is a basketball school now, so we can switch gears and talk basketball. Yes, I'm just kidding. But I bring it up solely to say I was told what Matt Jones was told, what Jacob was told, Jacob Polacek, that it is about a 3 to 4 week thing. I think he'll be back for the Louisville game in the middle of the season. Florida, by the way, opening up against Arizona in a few weeks, as Jeffrey Banks says. Florida's a basketball school now. Anyway, tell you what, Todd Golden, man, he's building a monster. I will see them in person in Vegas in just a couple weeks. Let's get to some of your other comments. By the way, should mention, if you ever want to support the show, we always take super chats. And I think the other thing, too, we do have the membership tier. You want to become a member, help support the show. It's $4.99 a month. You know, listen, it's cheaper than a cheap beer at the bar. You know, you go to the bar, get a Bud Light or whatever. It's what, $6, $7, $8 wherever you're going. I just bring it up. We have the membership tier. All you have to click on is join membership. We have a special, special giveaways, special prizes, things like that for listeners and for members. All you got to do, again, join as a member. $4.99 a month. You know, by the way, it helps us like with travel, with stuff like we're a two-man shop. It's me, it's producer Matt. We do it solo. You do want to support the show, hit that join membership tab. $4.99 a month. It is pretty cheap. Let's go. Let's see here. A couple comments. Buck Short says, go get Drinkowitz, please. Mullen 2.0, kind of a jerk. He's certainly cocky. He's certainly offensively inclined. I'll say this, the Dan Mullen stuff, I will say with the Dan Mullen stuff, I do think Dan Mullen is set at UNLV for a while. Now, I know UNLV lost, but Dan Mullen had the tweet that said he's 100% not going anywhere. I tend to agree with him. But yeah, Drinkowitz, kind of does feel like a little Dan Mullen 2.0 vibes. The Mark Stoops comments keep rolling in. Come on, we all know Mark Stoops is a great fit at Florida. Maybe is Lane Kiffin's defensive backs coach. A lot of people asking me about Stoops and who Kentucky. Listen, I've said what I've said about Mark Stoops. I also do think that I believed probably 3 or 4 weeks ago that Mark Stoops would take a negotiated buyout just to get out of Kentucky. I do think when that report came out that they paid $22 million for their basketball roster last week, I think it's hard for Mark Stoops or his agents to say, you know what, we should probably just go ahead and take a reduced buyout. I think he's probably sitting there saying, you better pay me every dollar that you owe me because you owe me a lot of money. Let's see here. Florida Boosters. This is from AB. Says, hire Lane Kiffin yesterday. Kiffin is the modern day Spurrier with the visor and everything. Stay away from the stupidity of the Gruden talk. That is a disaster waiting to happen. I think Gruden could be a good college coach. I need to know who his coordinators are. I need to know who his recruiting guy is. If you're bringing some Mike Lombardi clown show that doesn't know what he's doing, don't do it. If you're bringing people that know how to recruit in college football, that's a different conversation. But I think Gruden makes more sense at a Kentucky. I think Gruden makes more sense at Arkansas, maybe even in Auburn. I don't think you can, if you're Florida, you can just take a total wild card like John Gruden. So people are asking about Jimbo Fisher. So, listen, Jimbo Fisher is going to put his name into all of these conversations. Jimbo Fisher is not getting the Florida job. Jimbo Fisher is not getting the Auburn job if Auburn opens. Arkansas, I think at this point, I feel like it's going to be Bobby Petrino. They're so close. They just need a competent defense, and they're, 5-2 at this point, maybe 6-1. Jimbo is certainly putting his name out there. Somebody told me that yesterday, like, oh, watch out for Jimbo here. I'm like, Jimbo is not getting that job. Nobody wants Jimbo Fisher. Jordan says that he thinks that Florida is about to make Lane Kiffin a $12 million a year coach at Ole Miss. He thanks you in advance. Was worth noting, the AD put out the statement on Friday, and Jimmy Sexton was in town walking around Lane Kiffin, was seen walking with Lane Kiffin. That is, of course, the power agent, Jimmy Sexton. And, he could have been there to help Lane Kiffin. He could have been there to help, be in the process of negotiating a contract extension. We don't know. We'll find out. But again, Lane Kiffin has to be the guy. Alan says, go get Lane. I agree. Go hire Virgil says, go hire Tennessee's coach and make them bad again. Tell you what, Tennessee fans are mad at Heupel for throwing that ball on the goal line on Saturday night. Maybe you go steal Josh Heupel from Tennessee. That would be funny, but I don't think that will happen. Darren says, Summerall or Gruden. I don't know if that's for Florida or for Kentucky. I don't know. Michael says, Hugh Freeze to Florida. Hugh Freeze, I'll tell you what, you know where Hugh Freeze is going if Auburn gets rid of him? He's going to Pebble Beach, or he's going to Bethpage Black, or he's going to Shinnecock or whatever. He ain't going anywhere other than to the golf course with all of his buyouts. This my guy right here says, Torres is a champ. That is the E to the F and D. I don't know what that means, but whatever. Appreciate your support. Brian says, please let Summerall be the Kentucky head coach. By the way, I guess now is as good a time as I'm going to wait. We may have a Kentucky-related shirt with John Summerall's name, maybe attached to it. I got to make sure that we just redesigned AaronTorresOnline.com. I want to make sure that we can go ahead and make purchases there before I start promoting it. Kentucky Wildlife says, would Brian Kelly leave LSU? Brian Kelly would leave LSU. He's another one. I don't know who's hiring him. He stinks. They don't win games that matter. I don't think Brian Kelly is going to be the guy anywhere. I don't think he's going to be the guy at Penn State. I don't think he's going to be the guy at Florida. Let's see here. Franklin. James Franklin is an interesting one. The problem with James Franklin, I'm just going to read you Billy Napier's bio. You tell me who this sounds like. So Billy Napier, great in the community. Everybody likes him. Great recruiter. Great infrastructure guy. Not great on game day. Doesn't beat good teams, especially away from home. Who does that sound like? Kind of sounds like James Franklin, right? Now, listen, I know it's hard to beat good teams, but at some point you got to beat good teams if you're going to be a head coach at Florida or Penn State or whatever. And I guess that would be my concern if I was a Florida fan going after James Franklin. Like, again, James Franklin makes sense at Virginia Tech. James Franklin makes sense at UCLA. James Franklin makes sense at Arkansas if you want somebody to elevate the program. But if you're at Florida, you're trying to win national championships, and I don't know that James Franklin is that guy. So I don't think so. Cat fan says John Summerall wins wherever he goes. Google him. The new Kurt Signetti. Just Google him. He does win wherever he goes. Troy, Tulane, and oh, by the way, it's worth noting there as well, former Kentucky player from the state of Alabama. I'll say this. John Summerall is going to have an interesting few months. If Lane does leave for Ole Miss, I think John Summerall is the number one candidate. If Hugh Freeze gets fired at Auburn, I think John Summerall is the number one candidate. And of course, if Kentucky moves on Mark Stoops, I think he's the number one candidate. Let's see here. Any other ones for right now? Kentucky for Gruden. Listen, Gruden wants to coach. I think he'd do a lot worse than John Gruden, just me. And he wants to coach in the SEC. We're going to go ahead and get on a couple other ones here. This is funny. UAB has passed on Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher owes Jameis Winston everything. I don't know if that's true. UAB, of course, just fired Trent Dilfer. Alex Mortensen, I guess that's Chris Mortensen's son. I was not aware of that, is the interim at UAB. They got a nice win on Saturday. So maybe he takes care of business. Kentucky Outdoors Life says, you don't think Ole Miss is going to give him the money? I think Ole Miss is going to give him the money. I think the question becomes, at some point, certain jobs are just better than others. And you can get paid a lot of money. It's just easier to win at Florida than Ole Miss. Let's see here. Offer Lane Kiffin $25 million. Oh, boy. Ooh, Don just throws out an interesting wild card. He said, what about Brian Kelly at Wisconsin? Now, that feels like it might actually fit. He's kind of a jerk. That's the only thing. Wisconsin just feels like a community of very nice people, but doesn't he feel way more Midwest than Louisiana? So that's something worth noting there. Wisconsin's going to need somebody. I could see that happening as well. Tell you what, if LSU opened this year as well, that would just be insane. Hugh Freeze should get fired today. You can look at his body language and see he's finished. We talked about it on the full Aaron Torres pod. By the way, encourage everybody to go back and check that out. We did go live on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern time. We knew Billy Napier was probably going to be fired. That stinks. But we did a full show. We had like 1,000 of you in the live chat at one point, so we appreciate your support there. But yeah. All right, a couple more questions. We'll get out of here. William says, let's go get more Marcus Freeman. Jackie Walcott says, word is Penn State is trying to get the Louisville football coach. Listen, they can try. Jeff Brom, Jackie, it looks like you're a Louisville fan, so Jeff Brom is a Louisville native. The other thing with Louisville, like Signetti when we thought he was available, like whatever. I mean, the Louisville, Jeff Brom could be coaching into January. I mean, they could play for an ACC title. They win the ACC, they're going to the college football playoff. So just thinking to go. Anthony says Norvell's got to go today. Listen, man, I mean, that's one, Pete Nakos put out a report that there were phone calls being made about Florida State this morning. So we'll see what happens. By the way, speaking of Pete Nakos, he just put out Florida's schedule for next season. 9-game league schedule with Florida Atlantic, Campbell, and at Florida State. Do have Ole Miss, do have Oklahoma. No rest for the weary in the SEC. All right, I'll tell you what, another day where we're doing 2 hours of live content. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. If you're not subscribed, Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel, do appreciate everybody's support. Appreciate the thousands of you who have listened to the show at some point today. It's been an awesome day. It's been an awesome couple weeks. Listen, for the basketball people, we got a lot of Kentucky fans in the chat. Florida, now a basketball school. We're going to have plenty of basketball these coming weeks as well. As I said, I will be at the Florida season opener in Vegas 2 weeks from tomorrow. So I'm excited about that. Thank you again to our ticketing partners, SeatGeek and the SeatGeek app. Use promo code Torres, gets you $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek.com, promo code Torres. Also, thank you to Circa Sportsbook and Circa Casino. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Busy day as always. Time for me to go. Thank you for your support. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. I'll be back Tuesday morning. We'll get you caught up on what's going on at Florida. Maybe there's some Florida State news, Penn State. A lot to discuss. Aaron Torres.